Imagine that it's the year 2025, and our planet has completely changed. Rising sea levels, extreme weather, and the ocean becoming more and more acidic are just some of the problems people have been dealing with for years. But in one of the world's largest coastal cities, the situation has become too serious. It was a sunny day in June when a massive earthquake shook the city to its core. The ground beneath people's feet heaved and shook, and buildings swayed dangerously. People ran through the streets in panic, trying to find safety. But as soon as the ground settled, the inhabitants of the city realized the real danger. A wall of water, almost 100 feet high, was rushing toward the city, propelled by the force of the earthquake. The tsunami hit the city with unimaginable force. Entire neighborhoods were wiped out, and thousands of people lost their lives. But here's where things get interesting. In the aftermath of the disaster, the city's authorities realized that they couldn't just rebuild the city as it was before. They needed to be better prepared for the next potential disaster. And so they came up with an incredibly ambitious project to build an underwater city. The goal was to create a self-sufficient, sustainable city beneath the ocean's surface that could withstand any natural disaster. The underwater city would be powered by renewable energy, using tidal power and underwater solar panels. It would be designed to withstand extreme weather and would have its own emergency response systems. The project attracted some of the world's top scientists, engineers, and architects. They worked tirelessly to design the city and carefully considered every aspect of the project. The underwater city would have everything that a typical city had, from schools and hospitals to stores and restaurants. There would be underwater farms where fish and other marine creatures could grow. The city would even have its transportation system, advanced submarines, and underwater tunnels connecting different parts of the city. The project became a shining beacon of hope for people. It showed that even in the face of disaster, we could come together to create something amazing. But as time went on, the project no longer seemed so perfect. The cost of the project turned out to be higher than planned. There were also concerns about how long such a project would exist. After all, the ocean is very unpredictable. And still, the team of scientists and engineers never gave up. After years of trial and error, they finally created the perfect underwater city, a marvel of engineering, a self-contained ecosystem that could sustain people indefinitely. The buildings were constructed from a material that could withstand the immense pressure at the bottom of the ocean, and the city itself was powered by a network of advanced hydroelectric turbines. It wasn't long before the first wave of colonists arrived at the underwater city. There were different people in this group, and each of them had their own reasons for choosing to live in this new world beneath the waves. Some were adventurers seeking a new world to explore, while others were hoping to escape natural disasters raging on dry land. But despite their differences, all these people shared a common goal: to build a new society, one that was in harmony with the natural world. The underwater city flourished, and new discoveries were made every day. The colonists developed new technologies and ways to tame the power of the ocean. They learned to farm the sea and started cultivating underwater gardens that provided them with a steady food supply. But living underwater was challenging. People felt isolated and even claustrophobic. The situation came to a head when a group of activists started to protest against the city's expansion plans. They argued that the underwater city was a threat to the environment it was meant to protect, and that the colonists should focus on reducing their impact on the delicate underwater life. The protests sparked a heated debate among the colonists. Some of them argued that the survival of the city depended on its growth and expansion. Others claimed that the city needed to prioritize the protection of the environment above all else. In the end, a compromise was reached. The city would continue to expand, but the main priority would be sustainability and a responsible attitude to nature. The colonists would do their best to reduce their impact on the environment by using new technologies and following strict conservation rules. And they would also remember the importance of protecting the ocean and its fragile ecosystem. Years went by, and the underwater city continued to thrive. New generations of colonists were born, and they grew up in a world entirely different from the one their ancestors had known. They never saw the world on the surface, but appreciated the beauty and complexity of the underwater world they called home. And as the years passed, the city became a symbol of hope for a world struggling with the devastating effects of climate change. It showed that despite all difficulties, people could come together to create a better world. It is a reminder that the future is not set in stone and that we can build it sustainably and in harmony with the natural world.
You have about $130 million. What would you do with it? Fly into space or buy an island? There are many ways you can spend this much money, but one anonymous investor used it to build an extravagant underwater city. The project is not finished yet, and a lot of people are currently working really hard to make this crazy idea come to life. If all goes well, in the near future, living under the sea may become a reality. In the past century, there was a limestone quarry near the Welsh border in England. In the 1990s, it became flooded and turned into a lake 260 feet deep. Now, there's a large construction project going on around it. Trucks transport materials and people in overalls construct huge modules that look like giant futuristic submarines. These modules are called sentinels, and they will become the buildings of a small underwater city. Builders and engineers create durable stainless steel materials that allow these houses to withstand a depth of up to 650 feet. This is the upper limit of the twilight zone, where very little sunlight penetrates. Large squid and other creatures live in this zone. Imagine waking up in an underwater hotel room and seeing a giant squid staring at you from the dark. Or even worse, you see a huge eye watching you as you wake up. This could happen if sentinels were successfully installed in the depths of the ocean. Meanwhile, let's return to our project on a small lake. The project is called Deep. Its goal is to make life underwater as comfortable as possible. Inside living modules, builders install bedrooms, kitchens, bathrooms, and observation windows. People will access them using small submarines. However, it's not as simple as calling a taxi. To live underwater, you need to train under the guidance of experienced instructors to test yourself in underwater life simulators. The cost of living there will likely be expensive, but it's worth it. At least you will be well fed. A chef will develop a special menu, and all food will be stored in vacuum-sealed bags to preserve its flavor and nutrients. It all sounds great, but there's a question. Who is financing this project? No one knows the answer. Deep is funded by a secret investor who has already spent more than $100 million. Interestingly, this is not the first attempt to create an underwater dwelling. For example, Jacques-Yves Cousteau, a famous diver explorer, first created the Conshelf 1 underwater house in 1962. This was a steel cylinder located at a depth of 30 feet, where 2 divers lived for a week. In 1970, several women also spent 14 days underwater in the Caribbean Sea at a depth of 50 feet. The aim of that project was to study human psychology in a cramped environment, similar to that of a spaceship. Unsurprisingly, that project was partly funded by NASA. Okay, we have windows overlooking marine life, delicious food, underwater parties, and solitude away from civilization. All these things sound cool, but if we put aside the fun part for a moment, is there any real benefit to it? Oh yeah, ocean exploration. Many marine biologists believe that the best way to explore the ocean is from within. Diving doesn't help much since divers are limited by time and body needs. They can stay underwater for only about an hour and a half at a time. Underwater cities could allow us to live underwater for months. But the most important thing is long-term observation of marine life in its natural habitat. In the mid-1990s, a group of researchers wanted to study the development and nutrition of corals. They brought them to the lab for testing and found out that corals reacted differently to tests in artificial environments than in the ocean. Their behavior in a laboratory setting was different from their behavior in the wild. Underwater cities could also provide work for archaeologists who study the remains of ships that have sunk throughout history. Plus, such cities could help protect us from future disasters. In the event of a catastrophe like an earthquake, tsunami, or volcanic eruption, scientists and engineers could build water-based shelters like the Sub-Biosphere 2 project to provide refuge for people. These circular structures could sink into the ocean and give shelter for up to 50 or 100 people, allowing them to wait out the disaster from a safe distance. Underwater cities could be an excellent solution to overpopulation, but there are some downsides. We already pollute the world's oceans, and what if we literally lived inside them? It's one thing to use labs to study marine life, but it's another to build hotels for vacationers. One such hotel, called the Water Discus, is a building at a depth of no more than 32 feet. It will have 21 rooms and a restaurant with coral reef views. While the conditions seem comfortable, some experts worry that staying there for long periods could be harmful because of the lack of sunlight. Nevertheless, it would be interesting to stay there for a week and see how it feels. The most challenging aspect of creating such laboratories, hotels, and bunkers is ensuring a reliable life support and safety system. It's crucial that the air, humidity, and temperature be as comfortable as possible for people to live in these structures. However, this requires a significant amount of energy. Currently, all modern underwater buildings rely on external sources of energy located on the surface. But scientists plan to make future underwater projects fully autonomous, using kinetic energy from waves and powerful solar panels to generate power. It's also important to create the right structure for these buildings. Rather than covering an underwater city with a giant bubble, it's more efficient to create several large housing modules. Each module should consist of steel, glass, and special cement. Also, the depth shouldn't exceed 1,000 feet, since a deeper location would require thicker walls because of high water pressure. To load and move these residential modules safely, engineers can use ballast tanks. These are large containers filled with water, which are used to pull the modules down deep into the ocean. Once in place, engineers can release the water from the tanks and fill them with air, causing the house to float back to the surface. And what about fresh air? Fish extract oxygen from the water using their gills, but this method is obviously not suitable for humans. Therefore, we need to deliver air from the surface. It can be piped into the city and mixed with a special substance called sodasorb, which reacts with carbon dioxide and removes it. It would be great if we could generate oxygen inside our underwater cities rather than relying on other sources. This would require farms and plants that can produce oxygen through photosynthesis. But instead of sunlight, these plants would use artificial light. If we talk about complete autonomy, people could get food from the water at any moment, put on scuba gear, a mask, and an oxygen tank, and leave the hotel through an airlock. Use harpoons and fishing nets to catch dinner. Remember to check your oxygen reserves and don't swim for too long. Frying fish in a pan won't work because of strong odors. In an underwater dwelling, air is static like in an airplane cabin, so odors become stronger. Maybe in the future, engineers will create a dedicated cooking area, but for now, you'll have to rely on canned and dehydrated food. If you get bored, go for an underwater walk. Instead of carrying oxygen tanks, use hollow tubes connecting your mask to an air source inside your home. But don't forget that you can't go too far because the length of the tube is limited. Air, food, safe construction. What else? Drinking water. In the future, scientists may create filters in these hotels that desalinate salt water. This water can be extracted from the condensation inside the hotel, as well as from human secretions. Don't be surprised. Astronauts, for example, have been using special technology to filter their liquids and turn them into drinking water for a long time.
Let's talk about some deep stuff, shall we? A scientist spent 100 days below the surface of the Atlantic Ocean. Dr. Joseph Duturi, or Dr. Deep Sea as he likes to call himself, was living underwater as part of Project Neptune 100. After 74 days of the mission, he officially set a new Guinness World Record for the longest time living in an underwater fixed habitat. But he didn't leave the experiment and stayed the planned 14 weeks. You can test yourself and stay in the exact same place where Duturi lived. It's called Jules Undersea Lodge, after Jules Verne, author of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. The idea of Project Neptune 100 is to study how pressure affects humans, both physiologically and psychologically. Dr. Deep Sea, who's a biomedical engineer and associate professor at the University of South Florida, stayed so long underwater to see if increased pressure can help humans live longer and prevent health problems that come with old age. From day one of the mission, Dituri actively shared what was going on social media. He mentioned that another important goal for him was to inspire scientists from different generations to study life undersea. It was quite different from living on a submarine. Subs are sealed when they go underwater and have sea level pressure, so people on it don't feel an enormous difference in pressure, even deep down. Dituri's underwater home didn't have any solid hatches or airlocks between the ocean and the living space. It was like a glass of water turned upside down and pushed into a sink full of water. There was still a pocket of air at the top of the living space and a pool of water on the floor of one room coming from the ocean. So the air inside the lodge was squeezed by the ocean's weight and was about twice higher than on land. There isn't much research on what happens when we're exposed to hyperbaric pressure for a long time. There's only some data from submariners. Even after just 2 months under the sea, they had disturbed sleep patterns and problems with the levels of certain hormones that had to do with sleep. They also lost bone and muscle mass. Our bodies are built for sea level conditions, but as pressure mounts, hydrogen sneaks into our bloodstream, causing chaos. Between 30 and 100 feet down, you might feel some euphoria, but dive deeper and you'll feel like you've hit the bar too hard. Scientists think it has something to do with messed up signals between neurons in our brains. Luckily for Dituri, he was only staying 30 feet deep, so it wasn't an issue. Still, he only got half the amount of sunlight we're used to on land and not nearly the same amount of vitamin C. During the 100 days of the experiment, the scientists collected data, collaborated with other researchers, virtually taught a biomedical engineering course at his university, and reached out to thousands of students from different countries online. He stayed in the 2-bedroom apartment 30 feet below the surface of a lagoon in Key Largo, Florida. It's attached to the seabed by leg structures. There are 3 windows with a direct ocean view and some marine life outside. There's a command center that keeps oxygen, water, and power levels under control. An AC keeps the temperature comfortable, and a chef dives in to cook meals for whoever stays inside. When he was done with his mission, Dr. Dituri got back on the surface. His family and friends, the media, and many fans who were following his work online were waiting for him. He's now 55 years old, and he claims that living underwater has made him feel 10 years younger. The doctors who greeted him and the results of the tests they ran on him have demonstrated the anti-aging effect. Dr. Deep Sea noticed some improvement in his sleep and metabolism. He also noted that his body had shrunk by ½ an inch. He doesn't plan to stop his studies of how isolated environments affect humans. He's going to take a flight on a modified airliner where you can experience zero gravity multiple times. It's the next step to his dream of becoming a civilian astronaut and traveling into space by 2026. Meanwhile, Tim Yarrow in South Africa went even further and spent an impressive 10 days in the water inside a tank at a shopping mall. He broke a world record, but his goal was just to find out what would happen to him. At the end of the experiment, his hands looked absolutely terrible. People who helped him fed Yarrow through a tube, and all his waste went out of the tank through a different tube. Good thing. Tim managed to survive the experiment, but he said he wouldn't like to do it again. Tim, a British biologist, explained that if he had stayed underwater longer, his skin would have broken down and he would have gotten seriously ill. Luckily for Yarrow, his hands went back to normal after a while, and he didn't get any permanent injuries from this weird experience. Now, if you're looking for more comfortable accommodations under the sea, you might want to stay at the world's first and most expensive underwater hotel in the Maldives. Guests of the Maraca Hotel wake up surrounded by the Indian Ocean, with bright coral reefs and exotic marine life. This luxurious suite was designed by top architects from New York and the Maldives. It's a 2-story construction with an upper level that has spacious bedrooms, a sun deck, and an infinity pool. The lower level is submerged over 16 feet below sea level. Guests of the Maraca get the royal treatment, which includes private butler and chef services, complimentary jet skis, on-call massage and spa treatments, and cooking dishes with chefs. But before you start packing to the Maldives for your unique underwater experience, You must know it all costs almost $14,000 per night. Now, one of the most exciting things humans have ever found underwater is the Yonaguni Monument off the coast of Japan. This structure is the closest we've ever been to finding Atlantis, and still one of the world's biggest mysteries. In 1986, a diver was looking for hammerhead sharks not far away from Yonaguni Island. He noticed a huge, unusual structure in the shallow water that resembled a pyramid with multiple steps or layers leading to the top, with clear symmetrical edges, angles, and even steps. As it turned out later, it was made of shale and sandstone 20 million years old. No one knows how the construction got there in the first place, but one researcher is sure that humans built it 10,000 years ago and was part of the lost continent of Mu. This mythical continent, something like the Atlantis of the Pacific, was destroyed by a huge earthquake or hurricane and went under the sea. Its survivors moved across the earth and found civilizations, including the ancient Egyptians and Maya. Academics often say this theory is nothing but a fairy tale, but the scientist who proposed it says only humans could have carved such straight lines, sharp corners, steps, avenues, and even statues that look like animals. Since earthquakes happen so often in Japan, the construction could have gone from the ground into the sea. The more widely accepted theory is that the monument is a work of nature. It explains the amazing symmetry with well-defined parallel bedding planes along which the layers easily separate. You can find similar 90-degree angles occurring in sandstone when erosion takes place. The area's naturally strong currents could also have shaped it. It's possible that over thousands of years, major tectonic activity could have fractured the sandstone into geometric patterns. During the Miocene period, tectonic activity collected vast amounts of sandstone in the area. Geologists think the monument could be part of a much larger underlying rock from this event, and earthquakes that often happen here have shaped the rocks into what they look like now. The lost city of Atlantis may have actually been found. No, really. Two researchers were working in the waters off the coast of Cuba when they discovered the ruins of what looked like an ancient submerged city. That happened about 20 years ago, and yet no one really talks about it today. It's like the authorities just took the research, locked it away in some top-secret room, and decided no one else should know about it. But why? Well, I'm going to tell you. Back in 2001, Paulina Zalitsky, a marine engineer, and her husband, Paul Weinswig, were hired to explore the waters off Cuba's western coast. They had two main objectives: to search for old shipwrecks, possibly hiding treasures like gold and jewels, and to locate valuable oil and natural gas deposits deep underwater. They were using a sonar. Basically, this equipment is like a sound-based radar. It sends out sound waves underwater, and when those waves hit something, like a sunken ship, they bounce back. The system can figure out where and how far the object is just by listening to the echo. So, the couple was scanning the seafloor with this equipment more than 2,000 feet below the surface. And then, out of nowhere, they found something way more interesting than gold or oil. They found stones. Not just any stones. I'm talking huge, perfectly arranged stones. Kind of like a mini version of the pyramid at Chichen Itza. Or even better, like a bunch of tiny submerged Chichen Itzas. Yep, they saw that. Or at least, they think they did. The thing is, sonar doesn't work like a camera. It definitely doesn't record video or take actual pictures underwater. What it does do is create images using sound. And those images are usually just outlines or shapes, kind of like a blurry black and white sketch. It shows you where things are, but not exactly what they look like. And that's exactly what happened back then. The equipment started producing images of these perfectly organized stone structures, and it really looked like some kind of urban development. I mean, the site was just too organized, too symmetrical to be just random rocks. But it sounded too good to be true. I mean, this discovery could totally change everything we know about ancient civilizations on the American continent. So the scientists decided it would be too irresponsible to announce anything without finding more evidence first. And that's why they decided to go back to that same spot. This time they sent down an underwater remotely operated vehicle to actually see what was going on beneath the sea. See? This robot was basically an underwater cameraman. And yep, it confirmed it. There was definitely something strange down there. It looked like an ancient city made of huge, smooth blocks of granite. These rocks were about 8 feet by 10 feet. Some were in pyramid shapes, others were circular. Some seemed to be deliberately cut and then stacked on top of each other, while others appeared isolated from the rest. Together, they looked like they were forming corridors and outlines of rooms. It was like finding large buildings in the middle of an underwater desert. These images were enough for Zalitsky to seal the deal. Back then, she confirmed that this amazing structure, her words, could have been a large urban center. Again, her words. Then the couple started to speculate. They said that these structures were probably built more than 6,000 years ago, which would make them older than the Great Pyramids of Egypt. It's even older than the famous Maya, the civilization that used to live in the Americas and is known for their ancient and advanced temples. The research also suggested that these structures might belong to a civilization that lived on the American continent thousands of years ago, and that we didn't even know about. This supposed civilization once thrived on a 100-mile land bridge connecting Cuba to Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. But then, something catastrophic happened. According to their theory, the Earth's faults shifted beneath the surface, leading to a massive earthquake. Then, in the blink of an eye, the entire bridge was destroyed. The land was swallowed up by the sea and ended up at the bottom of the ocean, and this civilization disappeared. Of course, all the connections to the famous Atlantis myth got the media totally hooked on the story. News websites ran headlines like "Lost City of the Caribbean Found" and "Atlantis Found in Cuba." So, could that really be Atlantis? I mean, did they finally find the remains of this supposedly super advanced and lost civilization? Well, it's hard to say. From the start, part of the scientific community wasn't buying into the story too much. First, there's the issue of the date. Saying that this civilization existed at this spot at least 6,000 years ago just wasn't very credible. Then, some European archaeologists argued that the stones they found using sonar might just be natural limestone, not perfectly sculpted granite. And third, it was too deep. Even with the whole theory of Earth faults opening up and swallowing everything, it's still hard to explain how an entire city ended up so deep in the ocean. For comparison, there is Heraklion, a real ancient Egyptian port city that got submerged. Today, it is only about 19 feet underwater. But this so-called Atlantis city is at depths between 2,000 and 2,460 feet. See how that's totally different, right? People think it would have taken around 50,000 years for such stone structures to sink to the depth where they are said to be found. And according to experts, none of the known civilizations from that long ago had the ability to build such structures. But for Zalitsky, yes, it was possible. She still believed in the fault theory to explain how this land ended up at the bottom of the ocean so fast. Big movements of the Earth's tectonic plates are usually followed by things like volcanoes and earthquakes. So, according to her, it's a powerful event, and the island sinking could have happened really quickly. This earthquake theory could also explain why some of the megaliths on the seafloor look organized while others don't. But to really prove any of this, they needed a specially designed robot to go down there again and take samples of the rocks and sediment. That way, they could figure out how old the rocks were and maybe even find signs of human life, like carvings, sculptures, or artifacts. The problem is, drilling into those structures isn't easy. They look like granite, and drilling granite that deep underwater is seriously tough. And more than anything, they needed money to do it, a lot of it. So maybe they just never got the funding. Because even with all that initial hype, no further explorations or studies were ever reported. And that lack of follow-up sparked a lot of speculation. Some people even wondered if the story got shut down on purpose, like maybe the authorities wanted to keep something top secret. As if this underwater city was built by some kind of higher extraterrestrial being, and they just don't want us to find out. But truth be told, the strongest argument for saying, yeah, that is definitely a lost city, is that nature supposedly couldn't have built something so symmetrical. Geologists did try to find natural explanations, or at least similar examples from other parts of the world, but they came up short. Still, just because we haven't found a clear natural explanation doesn't mean there isn't one. Nature can create some pretty wild and unexpected stuff, so honestly, that whole too perfect to be natural angle is kind of a weak argument. What most likely happened is that experts just weren't convinced it was actually a sunken city, and that's probably why no one followed up on their work. Over time, the buzz faded, the story disappeared, and the site slipped back into silence. And without more data, the true nature of those underwater formations off Cuba's coast is still a mystery. Being afraid of the ocean is a very understandable fear. We have it in our genes. In the past, humans had to avoid certain dangerous situations, like big animals and deep bodies of water, in order to survive. Plus, we've only explored 5% of the oceans, so we never know what we can stumble upon there. In regular conditions, GoPro is just a camera. But if you find it lying at the bottom of a 400-foot pit in the middle of the Caribbean Sea, that will make your blood run cold. Now, I know 400 feet may not seem like much, but a person who is deep diving for fun usually can swim from 59 to 98 feet deep only, unless they're a professional diver. But say you made it to that pit and retrieved that GoPro. That would have still been fatal to you. In this specific hole where the camera was found, there would be a layer of hydrogen sulfide, a very dangerous and foul-smelling gas, at the mark of 300 feet. The gadget was 100 feet lower, alongside its owners, two long-lost explorers. To this day, very few people manage to dive this deep and go back unscraped. In fact, the deceased explorers were found only with the help of submarines. Now, you might be curious about the content of the GoPro. In stories like this, we expect proof of foul play or sinister footage. But the only thing found there were the images of happy times the explorers had during their trip. A sad ending to a vacay. Now, in deep waters, you can also find many species that seem to be otherworldly, but in a cute and interesting way, like the alien sponge. This fun little fella is a sponge first seen near the Mariana Trench in 2016. It's actually part of an ecosystem dubbed Forest of the Weird. Okay, this makes it sound a bit creepy. And what adds to the weirdness is the fact that the alien sponge had two little holes that resemble little eyes, so like it's peeking at you. Ah, another fun fact? The skeleton of this type of sponge is made of glass. And if you're afraid of cockroaches, I'll let you take a deep breath here. Ready? Cool. Because on the ocean floor, there are more than 20 different types of giant isopods, beetle lookalikes, that can be as big as 14 inches. Yikes! But fear not, these guys usually roam the ocean floor for food. So, unless you dive 7,000 feet, which we've just seen is not possible, you won't run into them. Now, despite the horror movie name, the bloody belly comb jelly is actually a fascinating creature you can also find in the ocean. They live in the twilight zone of the ocean, which is between 820 and 4,900 feet below sea level. Pretty far from where you usually soak your feet. But what's so cool about this jelly is its color. Because in the twilight zone, the light is very scarce. Many animals either emit a faint glow, like the anglerfish, or create a camouflage. The jelly here is blood red because, in the pitch-black darkness of the ocean, other animals won't see it digesting colorful bioluminescent prey inside its stomach. Besides, the jelly has a row of combs that spark a very beautiful iridescent light. Beautiful and lethal. Humans also have their fair share of contribution to the weird fest that is the ocean floor. Depending on where you swim, you might just find parts of rocket engines used during the Apollo program. Now, when a rocket is launched into space, parts of it are dropped into the ocean where it runs out of propellant, making the rocket itself lighter. And a part of the Apollo 11 rocket engine, yes, that one that first took humans to land on the moon, was actually recovered from the ocean after more than 4 decades. And you can see it at the Museum of Flight in Seattle. Not a space fan? Well, there's something for the Oregon Trail lovers too. There are 2 locomotives living their best lives, or worst, depending on your point of view, just off the coast of New Jersey. They're from the 1850s and are sitting under 90 feet of water. They probably fell off of a transportation ship during a rough storm, or were intentionally pushed over the barge so that the ship didn't sink. Most of these things can only be seen while diving, but worry not. Even if you have a lingering fear of the deep ocean, you can still find weird things by simply walking on the beach. Look at these bizarre Garfield landline phones washed away in Brittany, France. The French have been having bizarre encounters with the sarcastic orange cat since the 80s, and it took about 30 years for French farmer René Morvan to come forward with a simple explanation. A shipping container with Garfield merchandise got stranded in the sea, only to find its final resting place in a sea cave. We bet Brittany locals are still haunted by the creepy smile of that landline phone. And just like a storm uncovered the Garfield secret stash, it also moved a few ships that sank more than 600 years ago. But this is not a simple Titanic story. It actually sounds more like Pirates of the Caribbean, because when the storm moved those old ships, authorities from Caesarea found 2,000 gold coins, some silver and bronze coins, gemstones, and rings. It was a bigger treasure than a dragon could hoard. But don't get your hopes up. Even though most of the underwater archaeological zones in this region are open to divers, these treasures are safely tucked away in a museum. Speaking of pirates, and I was, another weird thing you can find chillin' in the ocean is the pirate city of Port Royal, Jamaica. In 1692, the city was devastated by an earthquake, followed by a tsunami. A really bad twofer. But the good news is, you can still visit it today, well, scuba diving, that is. This is actually not the only sunken city in the world. There's also Thonis Heracleion in Egypt, which is not at the bottom of the sea per se, but at the mouth of the Nile River. There's also Bajau, a Roman town built atop a supervolcano. Now, you might be thinking Bajau had the same fate as Pompeii, but guess what? The floor actually sank and the town went down with it. So, have you ever heard of underwater crop circles? Back in 1995, divers in Japan spotted perfectly round circles formed in the sand. They were 6 feet in diameter and looked like those crop circles from sci-fi movies. Scientists simply couldn't figure out what or who did it until they caught the culprit red-handed, a tiny male pufferfish only 4 inches long. This little guy uses its body and fins to draw circles and squiggles and decorates his creation with seashells and corals. It takes the fish about a week to do so. All this hard work is part of a mating ritual, and if a female pufferfish likes the art, she will lay her eggs there, right in the center. The circular design of the underwater crop circle actually channels fresh water to the middle of the circle, the ideal scenario for the eggs to develop. And guess what? After she lays the eggs, the female pufferfish leaves, and it's the male that tends the eggs. But just in case fishes are not your thing, we can also offer you a cargo of rubber duckies, turtles, beavers, and frogs, 28,000 of them to be exact. These bath toys were traveling from China to the US, but much like our friend Garfield, were caught in a storm in 1992. From the North Pacific, our friendly duckies and beavers made their way to the UK by 2007, but some were bolder and traveled to Australia, Indonesia, Chile, Hawaii, and even Alaska. Now, have you ever seen a strange thing washed up by the beach? Let us know in the comments. Bye.
These people can spend more than 5 hours a day underwater, and this must be the closest thing we have to actual mermaids. Meet the Bajau tribe from Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines. This tribe developed an extraordinary mutation which helps them to almost live in the sea. Known as the nomads of the sea, they've been living near the waters of the Sulu Sea by the Philippines for nearly 1,000 years. Looks like Moana's got competition. Look at their houses. They're built on stilts, and there's a reason for it. These are the traditional lancha houseboats, which are great for getting to the water as often as possible. These little huts can fit a family of 5 and sometimes a community with up to 30 roommates. They're super easy to build. one hut can be completed in only 3 weeks. This also allows the Bajau to move freely across the seas. Since they lived in such a watery climate for generations, thriving on spearfishing and collecting shellfish, they started getting unusual mutations. You're probably thinking about superpowered lungs, but no. They actually developed bigger spleens than the rest of the world. It's 1.5 the size of a normal human. Why is it important? Because the spleen helps store oxygenated red blood cells, so having a bigger one is like having a natural scuba tank. This adaptation is similar to what happens in deep-diving seals, which also have large spleens. Scientists found that they have a special gene called PDE10A that's responsible for this. Bajau can hold their breath for about 10 minutes. For comparison, a regular human can do that for about 30 to 90 seconds. And the world record is 24 minutes and 37 seconds. They also spend up to 60% of their day underwater. And you'll never guess what diets they have. Of course, they eat a variety of sea creatures, especially lobsters, snails, and sea cucumbers, which are known for being very nutritional and even medicinal. They build their boats themselves, fish using traditional methods, and trade their surplus catch with the mainlanders for essential supplies. They also use this money to buy cassava and prepare their cultural dish called cassava pangikai. Since they don't have fridges, they line up tons of caught fish and sun-dry it. Thanks to this technique, the fish can last for weeks. People from this tribe are yet to develop gills and scales, but they have their underwater quirks. When they hold their breath and dive, their bodies go into a special mode where their heart rate slows down and their spleen squeezes out extra oxygen into their bloodstream. Usually, Bajau uses traditional wooden goggles and weighted belts. They also have incredible free-diving skills. They've conquered depths of over 230 feet. They start learning how to swim at about 8 years of age, or even younger. At the same time, they learn to hunt and survive in general. The Bajau people also make their own sunscreen. It's an everyday sunscreen called Borak Buas. It's mostly based on turmeric and rice powder, and women use it to protect their skin from the strong sun rays. It's a simple and cheap way to protect beauty, so it's especially popular among unmarried Bajau women who want to attract a potential spouse. But it's not all smooth sailing. In the 1950s, the Malaysian government put the Bajau in a pretty difficult legal position. After living for centuries as unrestricted nomads, now they have to carefully navigate its journeys across national borders and bureaucratic hurdles. This means that they're not fully stateless, but they're not officially recognized citizens of any country. Today, only a few hundred Bajau families live near Semporna, Malaysia, but it's getting harder to live such a life. The resources are scarce, and recently, some new restrictions appeared on cutting trees for boat repairs. All these things are slowly pushing them towards a more settled yet uncertain life on land. They're forced to resettle in places like the Bajau settlement, but without citizenship, they essentially have no formal rights for things like getting jobs or education. Modern life poses tons of challenges for them. Imagine seeing millions more colors than everyone else. That's what tetrachromats can do. Tetrachromacy is a condition where someone has an extra type of cell in the back of their eye. This allows them to see a broader range of colors. If an average healthy person sees about 10 million, then tetrachromats might see 100 million. The extra cone enhances their ability to differentiate between subtle shades that others might not notice. This mutation requires 2 X chromosomes, so it actually happens to women. And it's not like this is a super rare thing either. The study says that about 12% of women possess this unique condition, and that's a huge number. Most tetrachromats don't even know they have this super vision. They might not realize they're seeing more colors than an average person. This makes spotting tetrachromats and studying them kinda tricky. And since scientists themselves usually can't see more than about 10 million colors, it's also pretty hard to test people for this condition. But they think that, like with X-Men, after some special training, tetrachromats might unlock the full potential of their ultra abilities. Marfan syndrome is a genetic condition that affects the body's connective tissues, making them more elastic. This can make you unusually tall, have elongated limbs, and often be extremely flexible. And some people use this as an advantage in their careers. Javier Botet was diagnosed with Marfan syndrome at a young age, but he made a name for himself in the horror film industry. He can contort his body in such an eerie and unsettling way that this has landed him roles in numerous films such as Mama, The Conjuring 2, It, and Slender Man. But Marfan syndrome is a spectrum disorder. While some people with the condition can live relatively normal lives, others may face serious health issues. Do you sometimes wish that there was less sleep so you'd have more time? Well, some of us got that blessing. While most adults need 7 to 9 hours of sleep each night, some people can function well on only 4 or 6 hours. This genetic mutation, found in a gene called DEC2, actually influences many different species, not only humans. For example, it also works on mice and fruit flies. DEC2 helps regulate circadian rhythms, the natural biological clock. This mutation affects the production of orexin, which is a hormone involved in wakefulness and maintaining the sleep-wake cycle. Basically, it helps release morning hormones earlier than usual and fades away before dawn. They discovered this gene in a family of natural short sleepers. It was a bunch of people who go to bed at a normal time, 11 p.m. to midnight, but wake up at 5 in the morning without any issue. It's a super rare mutation. It might sound like something out of a comic book, but humans can actually have super strength. Turns out, some accidental mutations can unleash titanic strength without any crazy workout routines. There are 2 proteins in our body, myostatin and activin A, that usually are secreted by muscle cells to suppress excessive growth. In other words, these 2 help regulate the size and number of your muscle cells, so you don't end up accidentally looking like Schwarzenegger. But as you can guess, some do end up like that. People with this genetic condition don't produce these proteins. Without hitting the gym, they can naturally grow their muscles extraordinarily large, resulting in super strength. It's called myostatin-related muscle hypertrophy. Sounds kinda dangerous, right? And it is. When you become a Superman, there's also the risk of muscle imbalance, heart and joint issues, and other problems.